assessment team who produce and mark the papers. We also have Leyden Khalif, who's another person who's with us, helping us with the sort of management of the Zoom webinar, and she can help if you have any technical issues, for example, with downloading resources later and things like that. This will be recorded, and yeah, I see the recording has started, and you'll be able to access that recording by coming back to the qualification webpage or going to the Professional Development Academy, Pearson's training website. It'll take, I think, about a month, we were told, for that all to be edited and turned into a video version of this training, but it will then be available for you to come back to later on. So please do feel free to ask questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand if you'd like to unmute and talk to us. So please do that. We have probably more people in the meeting than we'd like to have just to unmute and start talking to us. But please do raise your hand, because there's not so many of us here that we can't pause to take questions midway through. So if I say anything that's not clear, you don't understand, I'm sure you're not alone. Please do ask a question either in the chat or by raising your hand. So we're here to learn about our new modular route for International GCSE Biology. And so this slide is just to talk a little bit about the differences between linear and modular routes. So as some of you are already teaching, we have a linear GCSE, which means that all of the assessment, both exam papers for GCSE Biology, come at the end of the course, normally at the end of 2 years of study, and that works well for many students and many schools. But we know that actually it's very popular for many students and teachers and parents to have that option of spreading the assessment throughout the course, which is the modular approach. So the linear course is not changing, it's not going away. You still have that option, but we're now offering a choice of these two different assessment routes to exactly the same qualification. And I'll just mention this very quickly now, we may come back to it later, but the certificate that students are awarded with at the end of the course will be the same, because it's the same content assessed in broadly the same way. They won't have a different certificate that says they've got a modular GCSE. It'll be the same one effectively. The modular route breaks the course up into units. So we refer to paper 1 and paper 2 when we're talking about linear biology, because they're always sat together. But because these are quite separate blocks of the assessment, we tend to use the term units when we're talking about the modular course. I'll carry on to the next slide, but then I will pause in a moment just so I can have a quick look at the chat and see if there's anything coming up there, or to see if anyone would like to raise a hand. But just to finish off at this point, whichever route you choose, then these are actually very similar courses in terms of the amount of time students spend sitting exam papers, the amount of time it takes to deliver the course in the classroom. And so we think both are excellent options. It's just a question of choosing which is right for your students in your centre. So a little more on changes between modular and linear. And just a quick point to note, which is that we're the only exam board currently offering a modular international GCSE in science starting next year, which is something we're quite excited about. It's been a lot of work, particularly for my colleague Chelsea, to develop, but we think it will be popular. So unit assessments can be taken over multiple series in the modular route, whereas they have to be taken all together in one exam series for the linear. There's no tier of entry for either, if you're not familiar with that term. For some qualifications, for example, the UK GCSE courses we offer, we have 2 different papers for each, 2 different versions of each paper called Higher and Foundation. The stronger academic students who are aiming for the top grades take the higher paper, and those who are aiming for a grade 4 or 5 take the foundation paper, which it assesses the same content but with less demanding questions. We don't have that for either of our international GCSE routes. They both have a single paper for each unit, and so it's actually quite a lot simpler in terms of that aspect of administration and planning. For the linear route, as lots of you will be familiar. You just have a grade boundary, which is different every year because it depends slightly on how the paper performed, how difficult the cohort as a whole found it. And the grade boundary is simply expressed in terms of the marks achieved on the papers, which is what we call raw marks. For all modular qualifications, we have something called a uniform mark scale, or UMS, which can take some time to understand fully and to explain to students and parents. But what it means is that the grade boundary is set on each paper, on each unit when it's sat in a particular year, and the score in terms of raw marks on the paper is converted into a score will actually be out of 120, but with fixed grade boundaries for those UMS marks. And it ensures that if the Unit 1 paper in November is perhaps very slightly easier than the one in the summer, then those can be kind of leveled off and they will contribute equally and fairly depending on which one students sat, because the UMS will be calculated slightly differently, and that's what goes forward to the final grade. Students can resit individual units in any exam series, and we'll talk later a little bit more about cash-in, but cash-in is the term we use when, as a school, as an exams officer, you decide to apply to basically have a GCSE awarded. You can do it whenever a student has sat both the units for biology or all the units for double award science, which we'll talk about later. But you can still, after that's happened, enter a student to resit just one of the units if they've performed less well on that one, and then you can cash in again and they can get a new grade. With linear, although it's possible to resit, it's always necessary to resit all of the units, all of the papers, sorry, both exams in the same series. So they have to redo the whole thing again. Yeah, so there's a point about the cash-in as soon as they have all of their results, but they don't have to. So you could choose, for example, as we'll see later, to have students sit all of their units for modular before the end of the school year, and then wait and see if you want any of them to resit before you decide to cash in. Whereas for linear, they're always awarded a grade whenever they sit the papers. Everything else is the same. Content, all of the specification points that you need to cover, the level of demand, the style of the questions is not changing. It's really just the organization of the topics to make them fit into units that's the change to the specification. I'll just pause for a second there and I'll have a very quick look at the chat, and if you have a question you'd like to ask over the microphone, then please do raise your hand. I see a question about when all this is starting and when the exams are. We'll talk a bit about timeline in a second. Okay, if I miss a hand, I'm sure Chelsea will, will interrupt me and let me know. I will carry on for now. Okay, so here's a look at a example timeline. Now, the timings of the units here are just one example. There's many different options. We'll talk more about those shortly. But the first teaching is going to be from September, coming up, September 2024. So that's when course delivery can properly start. And that means that the first key deadline for making exam entries, because there won't be a November series this year, first exams will be in June 2025, a year from now. So 21st of March 2025 is the deadline for making entries for those. There'll be results in August for those first exams. And in our example here, we're imagining that you might enter students to take their Unit 1 exam at the end of their first year of study. Of course, it's also possible, excuse me, it's also possible to spread the teaching over 3 years, and quite a number of schools will do that. But GCSE courses by default are really kind of designed to be taken over 2 years. And So you might take one unit, having completed half the content at the end of that first year. We might refer to our UK year numbering system, which some of you will use and some of you won't. So we tend to call, in the UK, it's year 10 and year 11 that students would be taking their GCSEs normally. Year 11 is the year they turn 16. So I think it actually corresponds to the American 10th grade. They're one number out compared to us. So year 10, year 11, if you hear that, we mean 14 to 16-year-old students. Then continuing to teach the course in September, covering the Unit 2 content. There's a November opportunity where you might want to enter students for a resit of Unit 1 if they didn't do so well, and then their Unit 2 exam in June. Results day, and assuming a cash-in code has been entered into Edexcel online by the exams officer, students receiving their grade in the summer of 2026 in August, but then they can, of course, resit one or even both units the following November or the following summer and cash in again if they want to improve. So just one example of the route through the course. And we'll just look at one more slide before I take another short pause to have a look at benefits of the modular approach. Now, some of you will have decided as a school that you're taking this step and hence you're here to find out more about it. But if you're still considering, or if you're needing to talk to students, talk to parents, talk to colleagues about why you're making the change, this might be helpful. So one of the benefits that we see, something which schools all around the world are increasingly paying attention to, is students' well-being and the mental health issues that can be caused by very high pressure, high stakes exams. So linear exams, as we've said earlier, they work very well for some students. Some students thrive on that pressure of all of their assessment for their schooling to that point, coming within one kind of 3-week window, age 16. But others, as I'm sure you know, would benefit much more from being able to spread it out and having that slight reduction in pressure that the resit opportunities present. So more opportunities for students to demonstrate their skills and to learn from feedback. And that's something which, speaking as a teacher here in the UK, where all of our A-levels and GCSEs were modular until about 7 or 8 years ago, it is something that we've lost, which is that opportunity students have to sit a real exam, have it marked by examiners, get feedback on how well they've done and learn from it and improve as they go into their next exam series. They can take exams when they're ready, like they do with other tests, for example, driving tests and music tests and things like that. And so that can really help students. And it means that depending on the situation in your centre, it might be that you enter some of your students for exams age 15, but others you wait until they're a bit more mature, depending on their individual progress. For teachers and the parents of students, it can be very helpful, of course, to have the kind of data you get from students sitting an actual exam series midway through their course in terms of planning to make improvements and support them in their second year. Spreading out the assessments with the November exam series as well as the May-June one can really help schools and exams officers and administering the exams. And in those parts of the world where it's like a financial burden on families to pay for exam fees, then it can also help them to spread that cost. Okay, I'll just take a very short pause there. Hello, Kate, I can hear some sound from your microphone. I'm not sure if you're asking a question or whether you're unmuted by mistake, but feel free to ask a question if you have one. Okay, I will carry on. So a little bit of an overview here of the course, key course materials. So you might be teaching two different versions of GCSE biology. We have the separate biology, chemistry and physics GCSEs. You might know them as triple award. I'll be using the term separate biology and separate sciences because you don't necessarily have to enter students for all three, depending on the particular context in your region, in your school. You may well have a rule that they need to study all three sciences, as we do in most schools in the UK. But you may not, and you may simply be able to enter students for biology without the other sciences, or biology and chemistry without physics. So I'll call these separate sciences, but then we also, as you may know, have this double award qualification. It should take about twice as many teaching hours as the biology. It covers all three sciences, but in a little less detail. So the level of demand is the same. The questions are the same on those topics which are common between the two qualifications, but the separate biology GCSE has a few additional topics in the specification, basically, or extra points to cover within those topics. In the left box here, we have a quick overview of materials that are available on our website, which we'll talk more about shortly. The specification, which is key to understanding the content to be assessed and the rules of the exam. Documents that are there to support you with planning the course, the Getting Started Guide, course planners, scheme of work and lesson plans. At the bottom on the left there, we have a short list of paid for resources. So the ones with the round bullet points are free to you, and your school can choose, if it wants to purchase student books and lab books and teaching hubs, which we'll talk more about shortly. That's the digital package that supports the delivery of the course that you can buy, but you don't need to. I need to stress that you can deliver this course without spending any money other than the entry fees for the exams. It's up to you whether you choose to purchase resources as well. On the right box, we have some information about assessment support. So for the separate biology, we just have 2 units, units 1 and 2. For the double award, there are 6 units. Units 1 and 2, again, are the biology units. Units 3 and 4 are chemistry units. 5 and 6 are the physics. As we've already said, November and June exam series every year, except for 2024, where we don't have a November series. So the first one is June 25. And there's no limit to how many times students can keep resitting. All of the units, they remain available and their marks remain kind of in the pot of their assessment for the lifetime of the qualification. There are exemplar materials on the qualification website, example exam papers, examiner reports and past papers will be coming as soon as we have actual exam series, but we'll talk a bit about how Exam Wizard, our free past paper search and paper building web tool, can be used using the linear questions shortly as well. So you do have plenty of past paper questions you can use. Results Plus is there as well. That's another free service. Once your students have sat exams, that allows you to analyze their performance question by question and see how they've done on individual questions compared to the rest of the Edexcel cohort. So that's a very powerful tool. Okay, so this slide is about specifically for biology, how the structure of the course is split between the 2 units. So these headings should be familiar if you're currently teaching our linear course. I'll just give you a second to have a read through that. So I see a couple of good questions in the chat. Thank you for asking them. A question about the registration fee. Now, I might defer to my colleagues on this one. But I don't believe so. I think the registration fee is a one-off, and then you just need to pay for the individual entries when students are resitting. But maybe Chelsea can confirm that. I see that she's answered. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm fairly certain the registration fee, you just pay a one-off, and then it's every time you enter a student for exam, you pay the exam fee. But I'm just double checking that with some of my other colleagues just to make sure I'm giving you the right information there.
Thank you, Chelsea. And I see that you've answered the question about the double award in the chat. So if you're a little bit hazy, unclear about that based on my attempt to explain it, then have a look there. But yes, Chelsea, thank you. I did explain this for the chemistry audience yesterday. For double award, you receive 2 GCSEs at the end of the course, but having studied all 3 sciences. So you don't have a separate grade for biology or chemistry or physics, but you have 2 grades. So the top grade is 9.9, second highest grade is 9.8, then 8.8, and so on, because we're using the 9-to-1 grading scale for this GCSE course, like all our international and UK GCSEs. So you're effectively teaching 2/3 of the content of each of biology, chemistry, and physics, and students are receiving 2 GCSEs. It's actually what the majority of UK students do, because it's compulsory for them to learn all 3 sciences, but it's generally only those that are strongest in science and who are planning on pursuing it further for their A-levels who take separate GCSEs in the UK, and around about 3/4 of all the students in the country are taking what is effectively a double award. We call it combined science. Okay, so back to this slide. With the biology content split, you can see that we have structure and function of living organisms, which is a really big topic, actually split between the 2 units. There's just one topic down the bottom here, cloning, which is a whole subtopic which only appears in the separate biology GCSE. You don't need to cover it at all for the double award. But for each of the other topics, there will be specification points under those headings which are specific to biology and are not covered in double award. So that's how we make the double award at 2/3 of the content. And we'll look at some examples later which will make that a bit clearer, how that's shown in the specification. Okay, so here we have some considerations that you might have as you plan to deliver your course, and really key ideas like how you sequence information, how you order the topics, the key threshold concepts you want to ensure that students have really secured before you move on. All of this is very, very similar between the 2 courses. Just to go back a slide, actually, one thing I would say is it's common, I think, to teach the specification in the order that these topics are listed. For linear, you really don't have to do that at all. You could teach the topics in absolutely any order. For the modular, one thing that, of course, is very important and probably quite obvious, but forgive me, I'll just say it to be sure, is that you do need to make sure that all your teachers are very clear on when each unit is going to be assessed and that your plans align for that. So obviously you need to make sure that you've covered all the Unit 1 content before they take Unit 1. But that is a difference between the 2 courses, because linear, the assessment all comes at the end. The order doesn't matter so much. So here we have on this slide some different examples of how you could arrange your entries throughout the course. Y10, Y11, Year 10, Year 11, 14 to 15-year-olds and 15 to 16-year-olds. And of course, it might be that only a few of your students require a resit in November. In example 2, we're not suggesting that they all would. And example 3 is an interesting, slightly different approach where you might decide to deliver the whole course and finish it ready for exams in November. And of course, you would probably take this option if you had a school year that ran from January to November. But then you could have resit opportunities for Unit 2, or both units for that matter, the following June, and you could offer some targeted teaching for those that needed it. This slide is about progression between different phases of a student's education. It's an opportunity for us to mention that we also have international A levels. International AS level is the one-year course that is made up of the first A level units, and students can be awarded a grade for that at the end of 1 year of study post GCSEs. International A level is the full 2-year qualification that's made up of the AS units and A2 units. So we have Edexcel International A levels for biology, chemistry, physics, which our GCSEs are designed to support progression into. We also have courses called International Lower Secondary and International Primary, which have schemes of work and assessments and other supporting resources. So some schools choose to invest in this whole suite of courses, and they have the advantage then that they know that they've been designed to support students to progress through them. And we've got an example here about the circulatory system, and you can see the specification points and how they connect in terms of how the heart functions, all the way from primary science education up to pre-university study with the A level. I should also say, of course, that there's no pressure on you to deliver these pre-GCSE courses. They're just there as options available to you. And likewise, if you're not delivering Edexcel A levels, this GCSE course that we're talking about today will support progression onto a very wide range of study pre-university courses. I'll just pause for a very quick look at the chat in case there's anything useful for me to know about there. Yes, Chelsea has explained an important difference between modular and linear. If you're used to our linear GCSE, then you will know that the paper 1 only contains the content that is found in the double award option, because it's the same paper that's sat by double award students, and the separate biology, the additional biology content in separate biology is only in paper 2. That's not the same case here with the modular units. Unit 1 and Unit 2 for the biology GCSE will both contain some of that additional content, and they're no longer overlapping papers sat by students on both qualifications. We have separate papers for the biology and the double award. Okay, so supporting your planning and the production of your schemes of work. These slides are really just to help familiarize you a bit more with our qualification web pages, which can be slightly confusing to navigate and find your way around. So to find International GCSE Biology, if you just search for Pearson International GCSEs or Edexcel International GCSEs, you'll come to a page that looks like this with an alphabet. You can then find biology, and you'll have the choice between going to the linear web page or the modular web page. And even if you're teaching modular only from now on, it may well be that you find the linear qualification page useful, because there are some resources on there that are still equally relevant. And because the modular is so new, despite the excellent work of Chelsea, who's busy adapting resources and producing new ones, that there are going to be far fewer modular resources there than there are on the linear web page. So you might want to go back, certainly for the next year or so, and see what you can find on the linear page that is useful. Okay, so we have the specification, which is this orange cover here, and that's a really key document, which which is a really key document, which as I said before, you need to really pay close attention to in terms of the precise content that needs to be taught and the language which will be used by students in exams. Okay, I'm just going to pause there for a second, and I'll have a look at the chat and see if there's any other questions that I can answer before I continue. Hello. Okay, thank you for your patience there. Right, so course materials. This is a really key part of the web page. So look for this pale blue box, and there are 2 links there for the specification and sample assessments and for the teaching and learning materials. So here's a bit more about these. So there again in the top right is what to look for when you're finding the specification. We have different ones for the double award and the GCSE biology courses. Within the specification, a really useful page, whether you're still making the decision between the 2 routes or whether you're discussing this with colleagues and explaining to students and parents why you're making the change. There's some really useful content there. The qualification at a glance section is really helpful for understanding and explaining to those other stakeholders the structure of the assessment, how long the papers are, how many marks, what topics come up in each paper. And there's a useful page here which can help to understand the difference between the double award and the separate or triple science option. And this makes it clear that we have completely separate papers, but it also summarizes how long they are. So you might not be able to read this on your screen, depending on how big it is, but for the separate biology papers, we have 90-mark, 2 90-mark papers, whereas there are 2 60-mark papers for the double award biology units. And that reflects the fact that it's a smaller qualification in terms of how much biology you're teaching, 2/3 of the content. Sample assessment materials, so example modular papers are available there, again under that specification and sample assessments link. Looks like this in terms of the cover of the PDF. So as I said, 90 marks and 1 hour 40 minutes for each of the biology units. So they're equally weighted. They each count 50% towards the overall grade. Whereas the double award, 60 marks, 1 hour and 10 minutes, and they're going to be sitting 6 exams in total, 6 different units. Again, they're all equally weighted. And common questions between double award and separate just means that there will be some questions which are used on both papers, because as I said, they're designed to be equally demanding qualifications. The double award isn't an easier version, it's just slightly smaller in terms of the breadth and that number of different topics it covers. Getting started guides are found under teaching and learning materials. It's a slightly different part of the website. And then you have headings that you need to expand. So under guide, you find the getting started guide. Here's what the covers look like. And these are really valuable when you're, as many of you will be doing now, when you're planning ahead for the following year. So they contain course introductions, key content such as equations that might need to be covered, information about assessments, and changes from previous versions of the qualification. We also have example schemes of work. There's no requirement for you to use these, and you may just want to adapt your own, but we think they're very useful starting points and well worth having a look at. Again, they're found under teaching and learning materials. Excuse me. You have a lesson number or a week number, so it's really designed to be to have some flexibility, because different schools will have different length lessons and different numbers of lessons per week. But really, these are the weeks of the course. Lesson titles, references to specification points to be covered, some suggested activities, some resources you might like to use, including links to some of our paid for resources, which of course are optional, but if you're using our textbooks and teaching hubs, very helpfully, the scheme of work guides you to those with specific page numbers. They're the same textbooks as for the linear course. So we took that decision because if you are already delivering the linear course, we didn't want to have you have to throw those books away and buy new ones. It's exactly the same content. The only difference is that the order that you cover the content might be slightly different, but this is to help you navigate that. Practical videos and resource sheets and links to other really valuable online resources. And we've been careful to select organizations such as these, like the Royal Society of Biology here in the UK, which are really highly respected by teachers around the world in terms of the quality of their free resources. Key skills that you can develop to prepare students for exam, like transferable skills that can be applied to different situations, also there in the example schemes of work. And a really important point, because this has been put together by experienced teachers, we have opportunities built into this suggested scheme for assessment and feedback lessons and opportunities to consolidate learning before you put students in for their exams. So, as we've already mentioned, but worth repeating, I think, it's the same content as the linear GCSE, the same style of exam question. So really all the resources that are designed for linear, if you're already teaching it, those resources you're already using can still be used. It's really just the order that you're going to use them in that might be slightly different. And again, to support in your planning and a guide for you to take or leave as you see fit, not something you need to stick to. We also have course planners in the teaching and learning materials. And these have week by week, lesson by lesson overviews with links to practicals made clear, just to kind of help with kind of understanding the overall structure of the course. So plenty of different resources on the website, which we suggest you make use of. Now, useful here if you're teaching the double award as well, we have the content which is only in the separate biology in bold, and you will also notice that there is a B that follows the specification reference number. So the B means only in biology, not in double award. If it's not in bold, if it doesn't have a B, like 2.22, 2.24, 2.25, those are in both the biology and the double award. Practicals are in italics to help you pick out those. Revision time, as in the schemes of work, and feedback lessons built in. And for double award, the course planner is deliberately designed to help with really developing that disciplinary knowledge and threshold concepts rather than simply following through the units. Chelsea, I'm conscious that you've developed these resources and there may be something else worth adding. If anything I've missed, it's important about those.
I think more so that the links that are included in the schemes of work, just to quickly add in that bit, one of the pieces of feedback we had for our linear was that a lot of the links were out of date. So I've tried to source it from places like PhET simulations, the Royal Society of Biology, where they should redirect you if the link is out of date. If there is anything like that that comes up, please just do try and flag that with our team as soon as possible so we can fix that. And with the course planners, just specifically linking to the double award, you can obviously teach it from unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but I've just done that as an example for how else you might like to teach it if you're going to consider certain topics that it might be beneficial for students to know before they access something else. So for example, it might be beneficial for students to have an idea of heat energy and how that affects movement of particles, because that might help them then understand enzymes. But of course, if you don't teach double award and you only teach biology, it's less relevant to you, but it's just there as an example. Thank you, Tim.
No, thank you. I see a good question about teacher pack resources, teacher resource packs. Now, I don't know, Chelsea, you might be better placed to answer this than me, but my understanding is that instead of a separate teacher resource pack to purchase, the teaching hubs is our new kind of online package for all those additional resources that you might have previously bought in a Pearson teacher resource pack. Is that right, Chelsea?
Yeah, so there isn't a teacher resource pack for Modular, but that's because we have the textbook, we have the lab book, we have the course plan and schemes of work, we have a much wider range of support available. So we haven't produced a teacher resource pack as well, which actually tends to have slightly less in it.
But if you want those kind of additional resources, then I think Teaching Hubs is where you will find them.
Teaching Hubs is where you find them, yeah.
Chelsea and we're really responsible for the free resources on the website, which is what we're taking you through in this presentation. If you want more detail about the textbooks, if you don't already have those, and about the additional digital resources, the teacher resource pack kind of content that is in Teaching Hubs, then your best bet is to contact your local Pearson consultant. And there's a web page that helps you to find them if you don't already know who they are, but they are part of our sales and publishing team, and they'll be able to give you demo access and talk you through pricings and all those things. I don't know if you have that link, Chelsea. I can probably find it myself a bit later if not, but there is if you search for find your local Pearson consultant, but there's a separate one for UK and international. So it's the international one we need, obviously. But yeah, I'll have a little look later. We'll have some time for questions at the end, which we're nearly at. So let me just finish off last few slides. Additional support available to you. I mentioned it earlier, but Exam Wizard is a free service. You just need your Edexcel online login. If you don't yet have one of those, your exams officer can set it up for you. It's quite high security now to protect student data, which can be accessed with that login. So you need multi-factor authentication, which means having the Pearson Authenticator app on your phone. If you get into difficulties with it, please do email us. My email address for contacting me is coming up, and that's one way to get it fixed. So Exam Wizard, search for previous questions, and they are basically linear questions, and Exam Wizard is currently being updated and developed so that you can search via modular topics. But if you use it now and you find anything that doesn't quite seem right or make sense, then bear in mind it's still in development. And I think from September, it will be fully sort of functional for you. But it's worth having a look now, and you can certainly go into GCSE Biology, search for past paper questions by topic, and it's a very useful resource. As mentioned, we've got textbooks available for these GCSE courses with those additional Teaching Hubs links. If you choose to invest in those, which is optional, we have a linear to modular specification numbering guide, also under teaching and learning materials, which if you're switching from linear, you might find helpful. And there's a little bit more detail from that. specification mapping document for centres that are new to Pearson and want to see how it maps onto, for example, Cambridge GCSE specification content. So all of those available on the qualification website. Just search for International GCSE EdXL, and then you can find your way through to biology from there. Finally, as we have mentioned a couple of times now, on the linear site, there are some documents which will be coming shortly to Modular, the Modular website. But while you're waiting for them, you can just go and find them in linear. This is a really useful one. Core practicals are those practical activities that students can be assessed on in exam questions. There's no practical assessment for this course. There's no practicals that you are required to do, but students are assessed on their practical skills and understanding through exam questions, and it's recommended that you do these practicals with them if you can. So this document has equipment lists for technicians in an appendix at the end of the document. It has information about each practical and example exam questions and mark schemes, so you can see how they're assessed on those. And that's on the linear website at the moment. I think it's under a heading called practical support or something similar to that. And that is the end of our presentation today, except to just highlight how you can get in touch. So you'll find a box like this on that qualification webpage, teachingscience@pearson.com. Those emails come through to me. There's a link there at the bottom, book an appointment with your subject advisor. That's if you want to book 10 minutes or 25 minutes to talk to me over a Teams call about anything you'd like to discuss or ask about. And there's also a phone number that you can call if your time zone allows it to get some immediate advice. So without any more talk from me, I will just pause and let's see if there's any questions that anyone has in the chat, or please do feel free to put your hand up if you'd like to ask us anything. So if you have a problem with Results Plus, Sarah, then you can certainly email that email address that's on screen, and I can forward it on to whoever's best placed to help you. As Chelsea says, if it's a login problem, then you could try your exams officer, but you might need your account to be reset. And actually emailing teachingscience@pearson.com is a pretty quick way to get through to customer services, or that phone number if you can manage a phone call within those times. If you've not seen it already, Leyden has put a link to the delegate pack. It's just this presentation, but if you'd like to download those slides, have a look in the meeting chat from just a few minutes ago from 9:44, and you can download that.
I just wanted to quickly jump in because there was a question regarding, can a learner sit for Pearson exam at a Cambridge centre by any chance? This is sort of out of mine and Tim's sort of area of responsibility, so we're not experts in this, but I have been trying to do just a little bit of digging while this webinar's been going on to try and make sure I give you guys the right information. A learner can only sit at a Pearson registered centre. Your local team will be able to help you identify exactly who those centres are. And British Council is, I've been trying to find a simple way to sort of explain this, but they are, it's kind of like a UK public body that exists within different countries. I can see Tim thinking, if I'm getting this wrong, please jump in. Which allows students to be able to sit exams on the assumption that they're sort of registered with British bodies, which Pearson is. Tim, I don't know if that was a terrible explanation.
I don't think I can do much better, to be honest. Yeah, it kind of exists to kind of promote the UK, kind of culturally, and in a few other ways around the world, but it provides this useful service in terms of facilitating mainly private candidates, I think. So students who are like home educated and don't have a school of their own. They're well worth getting in touch with. I've also just put a link in the chat to find your local Pearson consultant. If you don't yet have textbooks, but you're interested in them, or if you're interested to know more about the Teaching Hub's resources, then please do use that.
So there's another question about, will the passage in 2B appear on both units of the modular biology? So if you refer to the sample assessment material that is currently on the qualification website that Tim showed, you'll see that the passage question, the comprehension question, is at the start of Unit 2. So it's currently mirroring what you would see in the linear. I am currently looking into making some additional sample assessment material to support with these qualifications. So please just do bear with me while we work on those, because they take a bit of a while to make. Teaching Hubs is a paid for resource. It's not a free resource, unfortunately. A student can sit. Sorry, so I'm just reading this. So a student can sit for Unit 1 and Unit 2 exams within the same series, for example, June. Yep, they could do that if you wanted. And it would still be the modular papers, assuming you entered them for your exams officer entered them for those modular papers. And the difference in content is outlined in the specification, the Getting Started guide. So the separate content will come up in both papers, so in Unit 1 and Unit 2, and it entirely depends on what topic that content comes up in. So if it's a topic to do with, can't think of an example off the top of my head, something like vaccination, it would come up in whatever topic vaccination comes up in, as opposed to in a separate paper where there's just separate content. Which is nice, because that means there's defined content in each unit, so you're not having to try and guess what is coming up. What about the design and investigation question? Off the top of my head, I can't remember what paper that comes up, but I can find that out for you. Can the student choose between the linear and modular exam? If your school allows that, if your centre allows that, then that's fine. One thing I would recommend, though, is because in the linear exam, they could be assessed on any content from the whole specification. You do just need to bear in mind that if you are teaching in a linear way, you may not have covered the content that's going to come up in one of the modular exams. So you might decide to teach in a modular way, but then have the students sit the linear style exams at the end of 2 years of the course, and that would work. But if you were teaching in a linear way, and then you want, by a linear way, sorry, I mean following the linear specification, you would need to double check that if you wanted to enter students into a modular exam, that you had definitely covered all the content that comes up in that exam, which you can check exactly what comes up in the exam by just referring to the specification, and that hopefully makes it really clear what comes up where. Hopefully that answers your questions.
I think that was pretty clear. I was just going to add 2 things. If you have if you're making this decision between linear and modular, and you're thinking, well, because of my school situation, we would want them to sit both units at the end of the course. Is there any point, therefore, doing modular? I think there is still an advantage, which is that if any students did want to resit, even if they took all their both units together, they could then resit just one of them the following November. Whereas if they did linear and they wanted to resit because they underperformed in the exam, they would have to resit both papers. So that's a strength of the modular option, that resits only require them to revise half of the course content and they can just sit one unit.
Yeah, I would also just, oh, sorry, I was going to say, I would just add to that as well, which you've sort of just touched upon, is the idea of revising half the content, because you know exactly what content should come up in each exam. So it helps reduce that cognitive load for the students, because they're not trying to revise a whole course for each exam. It's just distinct units, distinct topics. Sorry, Tim.
No, that's fine. I'm not even sure what I was going to add to that. Well, yeah, it was just that regarding students having choice, if that's something that you want to give them in your centre, it's the key point is when you come to make the entries. So although it's effectively the same qualification in terms of their certificate at the end of it, your exams officer will either enter them for linear or for modular. And so when it comes to for the summer exams, the June exams, when it comes to the 21st of March, at that point, the decision needs to be made what each student is going to do.
If the centre chooses to sit both units at the end of the year, will the time between them be at least 3 or 4 weeks, like what happens in 1B and 2B? So my understanding is that the exam timetable, the draft exam timetable for 2025 has been put out for consultation, and the consultation on that I think is finished by now. I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but I can double check that for you. Off the top of my head for this, it will kind of follow in regards to, you know, it could be 3-4 weeks between them, because you might have them end of or mid-May. I can't remember what date it was this year. I want to say it was the 17th of May, biology paper 1. Then you would have like a chemistry and a physics, and then you would have biology unit 2, chemistry unit 2, physics unit 2. But if you want to leave your contact details, I can try and find that draft timetable, which is available in the ether of the internet somewhere, and I can send that to you. So are there any specific videos that we can use for experiments? So in the schemes of work that are available for modular, where they exist, where I've been able to find them, I have included them, links and schemes of work. As a side note, I did actually used to be a science teacher myself, and I'm just going to quickly check if this works, but there was a great
Chelsea, while you're finding that,
yeah, that's fine.
I think I found the final timetable for next summer. I think it's just come out.
Yes, amazing, thank you.
And the dates for the modular, I'll put it in the chat now, but it's Tuesday the 13th of May and Monday the 9th of June. Whereas for the linear, in fact, they're the same dates. So whether they do linear or modular, it's the 13th of May and the 9th of June, 2025 for the exams.
I would also add, it's not coming up, but a lot of the practicals that come up in the International GCSE, there's quite a lot of crossover with the UK. So if you wanted to find more resources, the UK can also probably, you'll be able to find some resources there. Sorry, hopefully that helps. For specific videos for the experiments as well, where it exists, I've also put simulations, so you can also use that to help you with practical work. So in relation to the checking the contents of both units in Unit 1, much fewer and easier in contents of Unit 2. We can't change what's in either unit now. There was quite a long process that was went through to deciding what goes in each unit. And I would add as well that some of the specification points in Unit 1, so I think it's 2.15, 2.16, 2.17, is all to do sort of with quite general transport across membranes, but consists of diffusion, osmosis, active transport, which in itself could take 6-7 weeks to teach and do the practicals. So even though it might seem like it's only 3 specification points, the actual content and understanding and practical skills associated with that is also quite heavy. Can you send the timetable, final timetable?
Yeah, sorry, I sent it,
Yeah,
but
sorry,
as
thank you
a
for that.
direct message to just one person. So now I've resent the timetable that's in the chat for next year, May, June. Also a link to the British Council website if you want to find out more about them, and to the page to find your local Pearson representative or consultant who can talk to you about the teaching hubs and the textbook if you're interested.
Thank you, Tim. And also, yeah, sorry, going back to the Unit 1 contents of being for your needs and stuff. If you do have any additional support in regards to teaching some of that content or structuring it, please do feel free to reach out to us and me, and I'm happy to help however I can. I'm aware I may have just opened myself up to.
Well, if you come through to teachingscience@pearson.com, I'll look at that email, and if I think this is one for Chelsea, I can pass it on to her.
Yeah. We want to help as much as we can, because this is an absolute great provision for students and teachers. If there's no more questions, thank you all so much for your time, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Your very good questions have helped us. Good luck with getting ready for next year.